You grew up thinking the people who got ahead just made more money. That's not what happened. There's a version of your neighbor, same zip code, same job title, maybe even a lower salary, who is quietly building something you can't see yet. They own a duplex. They have a business registered in their cousin's name. Their kid's college is already half funded, and they're not stressed about it the way you're stressed about it. You've seen them. You might even know them. And somewhere in the back of your head, you've wondered what they know that you don't. It's not hustle. It's not luck. It's not some immigrant superpower story from a podcast. It's something much simpler and much more uncomfortable than that. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Picture a Friday. You just got paid. Not a big check, but a real one. Enough to feel something. You check your account in the parking lot of the grocery store. $2,340 hits your bank at 12:04 p.m. You feel good for about 11 minutes. Then your phone buzzes. Your sister texts about your mom's birthday dinner this weekend. You remember you still owe your friend from last month. You think about the car making that sound again. By the time you're at the register, the good feeling is already bleeding out. You buy the slightly nicer wine because you deserve it, because it's Friday, because you worked hard this week and you're not going to let yourself feel poor today. That's not weakness. That's not stupidity. That's a tax you've been paying your whole life without ever seeing the bill. The economists who study this don't call it a lifestyle expectation tax. That's the plain language name for what's actually a cluster of behavioral mechanisms that have been studied extensively under terms like social baseline theory, hedonic adaptation, and the concept sociologists call conspicuous consumption. But strip out the academic language, and here's what it actually is. You have an unconscious minimum standard of living that you will not let yourself fall below, and that floor rises automatically whenever your income rises, but almost never falls when your income falls. It moves in one direction, always up, and every dollar that goes toward maintaining that floor is a dollar that never builds anything. The floor has a shape. It's not just rent. It's the version of rent you think you deserve. It's not just food, it's the grocery store, the coffee, the DoorDash when you don't feel like cooking after a long day. It's the streaming subscriptions you forgot to cancel. It's the gym you pay $47 a month to feel guilty about. The floor is built out of 100 small decisions that each feel completely reasonable in isolation, and together drain somewhere between $400 and $900 a month that you genuinely cannot account for when you sit down to figure out where the money went. Here's where it gets architectural, because this isn't just about what you spend, it's about what you believe you're supposed to spend. In 2022, the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances found that the median white American family had roughly $188,000 in net worth. The median black American family had $44,900. The median Hispanic family sat at $65,000. But here's the number that doesn't make the headlines. Recent first-generation immigrant households, particularly from East Asia, South Asia, and parts of West Africa and the Caribbean, showed asset accumulation rates that outpaced every group within a single generation, including families who had been in this country for 4 or 5 generations longer. The income gaps don't fully explain that. The education gaps don't fully explain it. What explains it is the floor. A first-generation immigrant family comes to this country without a preset floor. They didn't grow up watching American TV that told them what a normal kitchen looks like. They didn't absorb the message that leasing a new car every 3 years is what responsible adults do. They didn't have friends in high school whose parents had a certain kind of house, a certain kind of vacation, a certain kind of normal, a normal that requires a very specific and expensive monthly expenditure just to maintain the feeling of belonging. They started from nothing, which meant they got to define what enough looked like from scratch. That's not a disadvantage they overcame. That is the advantage. Think about what that actually means in dollar terms. If a first-generation family of 4 lives on $3,800 a month and earns $6,200 a month, they're putting away $2,400. A multi-generation American family earning the same $6,200, but operating with a consumption floor of $5,700, maintained without even trying, just by living the life their environment conditioned them to live, is saving $500, same income, a $1,900 monthly gap. Over 10 years, adjusting for modest investment returns, that gap compounds into something close to $340,000. That is not a small number. That is a house. That is the seed capital for a business. That is generational. And this is the part nobody talks about. The floor gets inherited. Not through genes, not even consciously. It gets transmitted the way all the deepest financial behaviors get transmitted, through observation, through childhood normalization, through what felt like ordinary life when you were 7 years old and had no way of knowing it would cost you. If you grew up in a household where brand-name groceries were a point of dignity, where buying the store brand felt like a statement about what kind of family you were, that became encoded. If eating out on weekends was what your family did to feel like a family, that became encoded. If having the latest phone, the right sneakers, the car that didn't embarrass you in front of your coworkers, if any of that was what normal looked like in your formative years, then you are now carrying that floor in your nervous system. You don't decide to spend that money. Your body just rejects the alternative. Dr. Tara Coates, a behavioral economist at Morehouse, documented this in 2019 when she studied spending patterns across 3 generations of households with similar income levels. What she found was that children raised in households with higher lifestyle expectations, even households that were objectively financially stressed, reliably reproduced the same consumption floor in their own adult lives, even when they were consciously trying to save. The pattern was stronger than intention. It was stronger than financial education. It was almost perfectly predictive. That is the silent tax, not a fee, not a rate, a pattern that moves through families the way certain diseases do, not through blood but through exposure. Now zoom out for a second, because this doesn't happen by accident. The American consumer economy is not designed to help you accumulate wealth. It is designed to help you spend every dollar you earn, and ideally a few you haven't earned yet. The model requires you to believe that the next level of spending is the natural next step for someone at your income level. Lifestyle inflation isn't a bug in the system, it is the system. The marketing, the media, the financial products, the social media feed full of people displaying a version of their life that costs $2,000 more a month than yours. All of it is infrastructure designed to raise your floor. Thorstein Veblen saw this coming in 1899. He called it conspicuous consumption, the idea that in modern economies, people don't primarily consume to satisfy needs. They consume to signal status, to communicate, to belong. He wasn't predicting the Instagram era, he was describing the Gilded Age. But the machine he identified has only gotten more sophisticated, more targeted, more effective at identifying exactly where your floor is, and then building the next rung just above it, so that reaching for it feels like self-improvement rather than consumption. Your floor keeps rising because it is meant to. Here is what resets it. The first-generation immigrant family doesn't reset it through some miraculous discipline. They reset it through what behavioral economists call a reference point shift. Their reference point for enough was formed somewhere else, in a different economy, a different standard of living, a different version of what normal looked like. When they arrive here, everything feels like abundance. Not because they're grateful in some poster-worthy way, but because their nervous system literally does not register a $1,400 apartment as deprivation when they came from somewhere that looked nothing like it. That reference point erodes over a generation. The second-generation child grows up in America, forms American reference points, and often closes most of the gap in consumption behavior. This is well documented. The wealth-building advantage is sharpest in the first generation and fades with each subsequent one, not because the work ethic changes, but because the floor rises. So here is the thing that actually works. You have to artificially reconstruct the reference point shift that you can't get by immigrating. You have to deliberately re-anchor. That sounds abstract. It isn't. The practical version looks like this. Before your income rises, you lock your lifestyle, not forever, not permanently. You make a decision quietly without telling anyone that the next raise, the next promotion, the next side income does not change what you drive or where you live or what you spend on a normal Saturday. You let the money accumulate somewhere that isn't your checking account before your nervous system has time to decide it's available. This is not a budget. Budgets are floors. This is a ceiling, and ceilings are a completely different psychological structure. The second thing, and this is the one that actually disturbs people when they hear it, is that you need to identify whose opinion your spending is performing for, not your own wants, the performance. Because most lifestyle spending isn't about what you enjoy. It's about what you need the people around you to think about you. It's about not being seen as struggling, not being seen as cheap, not being seen as less than. When you isolate that specific spend, the money that's really about audience management, you find out something uncomfortable about how much of your paycheck is being spent on an image rather than a life. The families quietly building wealth aren't living worse lives than you. Most of them would say they're living better ones. Less financial anxiety is a better life. Having a plan is a better life. watching something accumulate instead of watching it vanish every 30 days. That is a materially different experience of being alive. But they didn't get there by finding more discipline. They got there because the floor they started with was lower, which meant the gap between what they earned and what they needed to feel okay was wide enough to do something with. You can rebuild that gap. It requires knowing it exists first. Most people never find out. They spend their whole lives paying a tax with no name, no receipt, and no end, and they wonder why the people around them got further on the same road. The tax is real. The bill just never comes with your name on it.